Hello, my name's Glenn Gorick and I'm the owner of this beautiful LC XU1 Torana, previously owned by Pat Peck as a Group C touring car way back in 1971 when it did Bathurst. The vehicle was converted in 1973 to a sports sedan as you see it, but in very much different colours. So we're going to do a walk around on behalf of Rick and Petrolhead Productions. We're going to have a bit of fun and go through this little car and fill everyone in on what this car does and how fast it goes and all the little special bits. Predominantly it's a monocoque construction. Much of the old inner guards and the chassis has all been pulled out of it, so basically you put your hand right through and you can wave underneath because there's no inner guards in it. It's all fiberglass, so it's lightened up. The idea of that was to get as much weight out of the car as you could. But all this car weighs about 800 kilos all up, so it's fairly light, fairly lightweight. Yeah, no, it's a 60-40, over exactly 60-40. The engine's not moved back at all, so predominantly most of the weight's taken out of the front of the car to get that front end weight up. The rear of the car's the same, it's all plastic and light. Lexan windows all the way through it, same at the rear, and a fiberglass boot. All the doors, they've had all the door cards removed from them. The whole door's been completely cut out to lighten it up and an aluminium panel put over it. So when you close them, they sound very hollow. Still retains its original windscreen. It's one of the few bits on the car that's still from its yesteryear. Still running its original diff housing with its drum brakes. It's got the fluted drum brakes on this car, which are extremely rare. Because it was a 71 XU1, they came standard on these cars. And we've retained that on the car. We could go to discs, but the drums work well when they've got the cooling flutes on them. There's no headlights, nothing in behind it. Talking about the engine, so the engine in the car is predominantly a Holden engine, but it's a John Wright race engine, and it's been made up of a number of Nissan components, Nissan pistons, which actually come up above the block, and it's a Duggan head. Now the Duggan head was fitted to this car way back in 1974. Now Duggan head's extremely rare. They're a handmade cast head. They sort of a cross flow, they run around and they get the airflow out very quick. So you can get over 400 horsepower out of this. So it's in a Holden engine, the general part of a Holden engine is that the air induction comes in, goes around a corner at the top of the piston, comes straight back out. In this sort of set up, the way they do it is the air comes down into the top of the pistons and out. So it takes the curve out of it a little bit more, and it's like semi-cross flow, we call it. So inlet's coming down from the top of the engine, that's correct, at roughly 45 degrees rather than 90, which it would be in the old school. Yep, and it runs a totally different oil system in it, so we have a major oil issue with Holden 6s where all the oil comes up to the top of the engine and it stays there. And as Duggan heads are notoriously bad for oil return, so we run drains, external drains on this one and get the oil back down to the bottom. Pretty much everything else is the same. The front end is still got the XU1 front end in it, still retains its original front end. It's got the double drilled holes and the welded wishbones that were all on this car way back in 1971, but the brake rotors are off a HQ and the calipers are from I hate to admit it, but a Volvo, and they're 4-spot. But they stop well. 4-spot Volvo calipers. So it is. Well, I was racing way back in the 70s and 80s, and we were using Volvo brakes front and rear in my sports sedan, and they were fantastic. They were pre-Harrop, so to speak. And then everyone went to Harrop, and then obviously AP Racing and so on, and everything's got bigger. These cars, still running a 15-inch wheel on this, so it's still relatively small in today's terms. Car actually had 13-inch wheels on it as a production car. So we had a bit of fun with the livery on it. We decided to pay a bit of a tribute to the Holden Dealer Team guys, and we put a few of the old sponsorship logos that are off the old 1973 actually one that came second when you might remember Doug Shivers pushed it through the pits at Bathurst. So we had a heart attack, yeah. Took him about 6 minutes to get it up to the pits, and they lost about 5 or 6 laps. And actually the car, Pete got the car, Peter Brock actually put the car back in the lead, and then they had a flat tyre. They would have won the race. They finished second by 30 seconds. So the Tirana was a giant killer, like this one. So it still retains the original passenger seat in it, and that's for fun passenger hot laps where we put people in and we put the old original seatbelt on, and then they get to feel the experience of the old Tirana, which bounces around still just like they did back in the day in 1971. It is. Yeah, it's very, very solid. There's no support in it. There's no headrest in it. So when we do the passenger hot laps, we have a little bit of restrictions on that, obviously because of those safety features that are missing in the car.
Your attention to detail is second to none. Like
That's right. The car actually, the tag says it's a houndstooth car, so hence the houndstooth in it. So another thing that's a unique point in this car is the fact that it has a steel roll cage. Most cars of this era had alloy roll cages and they were bolted in. This is one of the early fabricated steel roll cages that was put in the car way back in the early 70s, and it's still in the car. So very interesting how it's done. Runs pretty much the standard rear end. It's got the diff centre. It's a True Track diff centre running in the Holden casing, and then it still retains the original Holden diff housing that it used in 1971 at Bathurst. And it has, believe it or not, vented drum brakes, which do work very well when they're cold, but when they get hot they tend to fade out a little bit. It retains those beautiful rear brakes that make it very handy when it's doing sports sedan work. Other than that, the car's just a lot of fun to drive, and as you know, Tiranas are very famous as they've won Bathurst on a number of occasions, and these sports sedans were the forerunners for the modified GT class, where we lightened the car as best we could. And I had one of these with a mid-engine 6-cylinder in it back in 1978 and 79 through to 84. I raced that at Oran Park and Emeroo Park. The engine was right in the middle of the car and had a turbocharger on it, and it was all new technology back then, so it was trial and error. So this car was running around as a sports sedan at the same time. There's photos of this car behind my old race car of it. It's been a lot of fun.
who was it that actually originally built this car?
So the car was owned by Pat and Darcy Peck. That was the original build when it was a Group C touring car, I think a Class C touring car. And then it was purchased by Michael Meyer, and Michael Meyer turned it into the sports sedan. That's my understanding of it. And then it's been in this, it hasn't been changed, it's been in this form of a car since 1973. And the logbook goes right back to that 1973, addresses all the way through it, has all the owners in it. It's one of the most significant race history sports sedans in the country to still retain its logbooks.
Do you know what other drivers raced?
Only, I know Michael Meyer, John Chamberlain, and John Korean. They were very famous guys. If I had the logbook here, I'd probably read them all out. But those two, John Chamberlain raced in sports sedans for so many years, and he had a lot of Tiranas. This used to be black of all colours when John had it, and you'll see it in photos with Chamberlain across the windscreen, and still retains the original front grille on it. That actually John Chamberlain's front grille's still on it. It's just got the black stripe across it. A lot of history, hell of a lot of history. I've just jumped out of a Carrera Cup car for 4 days, Mount Panorama, and jumping in this totally different style of driving, totally different technology. This is fun, where the other car it's all technical and very high levels of concentration. This is more fun, bouncing around the track and doing your stuff. It's a wonderful car to drive, and I recommend, if you want to have fun, get into sports sedans, get into historic sports sedans. So much fun. You can have enough.
Mm-hmm.